This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. Hey, school success makers. Today we're joined by my new friend Johnny Graham out of the great state of Virginia. He's heading up a great Christian school there, and you guys are going to learn a ton from this episode today. Plus, this guy's got a great smile. I mean, if you find him on LinkedIn, his profile picture, this guy just got a great smile. So you guys are going to love this episode. Great content, great guy, great school. So please enjoy this next episode of the School Success Podcast. Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater, joined by a new friend out of Williamsburg, Virginia, Mr. Johnny Graham, who is the head of school of Williamsburg Christian Academy, of course, in Williamsburg, Virginia. They're doing some awesome things there. They got a couple different models that they work with at their school. And I was like, I got to have this guy on. He's got an awesome profile picture on LinkedIn. He's just like the jolliest looking guy. I love it. So I was like, he's going to be fun to have on the podcast. So I think you guys are going to enjoy this one. But I don't want to take any thunder away from Johnny, so I'm going to pass it off to him to introduce himself. So Johnny, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Mitch, good morning. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing awesome. This is going to be a fun conversation, I think.
I'm looking forward to it.
So I always like to start off the podcast with, if I was ever to visit Williamsburg, Virginia, what would we do? What's something really fun? Like, hey, when you come here, you got to do this thing when you come in.
Because you're accustomed to water, we'd have to spend some time near one of our beaches, whether that be fishing. I don't know if you're a fisherman, but we have a lot of natural attractions. We'd probably do some fine dining in Colonial Williamsburg and then just walk around the city. And then maybe from there, just tour Hampton Roads. It's a really beautiful area. And it's the cradle of where the American government experiments start, in the early 1600s. So there's a rich history here and a lot to do.
Love it. Love the history that's there. You guys are in an awesome part. I haven't been to Williamsburg specifically before, but I'm in parts around there, and it is absolutely beautiful. I'm sure there's plenty of apple trees, I'm assuming, around where you guys are at.
Yes, beautiful.
Love that. Yeah, we don't have that here in Florida. We have orange trees, so it's just a little different, but it's still beautiful.
Yes.
And, so I would love to get a little bit of backstory on you specifically, and then we'll kind of dive into the school and kind of how the school got to be where it's at today. But a little bit of backstory on Johnny.
Lifetime career educator from Central North Carolina, and have just loved independent education. I've been a boarding student and a boarding school educator and leader my entire career. And moved to Williamsburg in 2019, charged with vertical alignment and reshaping some curricular objectives. And so, really enjoying my time here.
Awesome. Well, give me a little backstory then on Williamsburg Christian Academy. I know you guys have the non-boarding model and then also the boarding school model. Are those both in the same building and the kids see the same kids every day, or are they completely separate schools?
Well, it's both and, Mitch. So as far as the academic day, it's all meshed into one entity. After the school day, it's a separate school within a school. And so the boarding is different and takes place on a residential campus. But, it's phenomenal. As a believer, we believe that heaven is going to be a global per Revelation 7 and 9. And so we try to model that in our recruiting and our academic philosophy. So it's a globally minded curriculum.
Awesome. With the boarding school, I'm actually not super familiar with just how that even works. So I'd actually love to just dive into that. I'd love to know the numbers of like how many students are in the boarding school side and how does that work? Do the kids get to have friends outside of school? They get to go get picked up by their families? Do they get their own cars? They can go drive and do stuff. I mean, what does that kind of like look like, and how is that
Right.
parenting? How are the parents involved, I guess, with boarding school at all?
Well, parents are involved mostly through the dean of residential life. Pretty much house parents live around the students. They take them shopping on weekends. They're rotating and taking them to weekend experiences. Could be a trip to Philadelphia, to learn about the American Second Continental Congress. You could be in DC or New York. It's just a lot of fun things to do on weekends, but really, if you think about a boarding school, your life is everything non-academic. So you get a package, your house parents are getting you your mail, they're making sure you're good. You have chores, literally like you would at home with your parents. So our job is to make their lives like home here. It's really fun and engaging. And if I had not been a boarding school student 30 years ago, it would be difficult to conceptualize, but, it's really more like a calling than a vocation.
Hmm. I would love to hear kind of your opinion for how you thought it was 30 years ago when you were a boarding school student. How did you love it, hate it? Was there just the days where you did love it and the days you did hate it? How did that
Well,
look?
at first, you know, I had never known of boarding school. A friend referred me to the boarding school we ended up at, but I grew to love it. And, my lifestyle is sort of dedicated to that now. So it's really nice, but it's not what I guess in the pejorative sense, a lot of people think, oh, this child has issues, or oh, this child, you know, is bad. It's not that. There are many college preparatory and life preparatory boarding schools that are preparing for, success in education well after the secondary years.
Okay. Did you ever feel, or do the kids, students enrolled in that, do they ever feel like, man, I guess my parents don't really want me or something? Because I guess that's immediately what I think of if I was a child in boarding school. Like, I guess my parents don't want me anymore. They're trying to push me off. Does it happen at all?
No, I mean, not in the ones I work with or have attended. There are traditional boarding schools. There are also some therapeutic, and that may happen at a therapeutic environment where there are some tough issues to deal with. But in the traditional sense of boarding, no, that rarely happens. Now, occasionally, could you get a dysfunctional family where that happens? Sure. But that is more unlikely than likely to be the case.
Okay. Well, obviously, running what you're running here, there's obviously got to be some challenges that come up with running this type of school, both models. I would love to have you just kind of dive into some of the different challenges you guys are up against, but not just talking about the challenges, but also how are you guys trying to currently combat those challenges?
Well, I'm one who does not like to mention the word COVID and blame COVID too frequently. In this case, though, I'm going to break my own personal sort of rule. If you're referencing the boarding component and the global nature of recruiting for the boarding school, COVID really caused us to put a pause in that for about a year and a half to 2 years. And so if this makes sense, Mitch, we're building back, our population. As you know, President Xi Jinping, there's sort of a slowness out of China, particularly. And so many boarding schools are recruiting in other markets. For so long, the Chinese were sending the most boarding students from other countries, to America. That is slow. So countries like Vietnam, the United Arab Emirates, I'm going to Latin America pretty soon, South Korea, and so the world is really picking back up now that it's open, but we're kind of seeing, a market trend where people are sort of realizing that China's sort of shutting itself off. And there will be individual students who come here and there. We have a Chinese one now, one Chinese student, but for the most part, we are recruiting the globe outside of China and focusing on the rest of the world so that we have a truly diverse international community.
Okay. What are some other challenges? That's a good one. We're talking about COVID. What are some other ones you guys are up against?
The global economy, for example, everything is not apples to apples financially. And so the reason why so many people love to recruit in China, full students were coming out of that market. And so financial aid, depending on where you are recruiting, could be a huge factor. For example, in certain European markets, families are able to pay less tuition. Maybe in Vietnam, they're able to pay a little bit more, but not as much as Chinese students would have. So depending on where you're recruiting in the world, you've got to really know that economy and really have good relationships with the agents who are sending their client students and families to your organization. So you have to have really good relationship with the agents and work through all that in the enrollment process. So that's a real big challenge too, because when you're budgeting and hiring faculty, you have to be precise with those numbers. So all of that, if you get right back to it, has been a major adjustment sort of post 2020 and 2021 related to the pandemic that we've just kind of come out of. So that's sort of the biggest challenge of the day. Obviously, domestically, the information challenge, if we just think internally of a hyper politicized environment now, I'm finding that our learning facilitators are really having a difficult time sometimes mitigating certain conversations. And so we live in an age now where fact and fiction and opinion have sort of coalesced, and knowing what is knowledge, what is fact, what are primary source documents, what's true. That's a big task, even internally, whether we're talking about boarding or domestic, but there are, challenges around information now. And it's not just impacting us. I'm sure if you talk to most heads, that's a common threat now with schools, regardless of where anyone is on the political spectrum.
Okay. Is y'all's main focus then, I know you're juggling both of them, but focusing on the domestic side of like trying to recruit like locally for the non-boarding school side, or is it internationally to bring kids in for the boarding school?
So both as head of school, so that my staff can really focus on the year-round local recruitment. I really dedicate myself to the traveling, the connection, but the day population is extremely important and the basis and foundation of what we're doing. And so, in the peninsula of Virginia, we are, really present and always pounding the pavement to grow day student enrollment. So it's a both and paradigm, not an either or. And just because of my international experience and relationships, I sort of end up traveling a lot and nurturing those relationships to grow our population.
Okay. Well, I loved hearing some of those challenges. I'd love to then dive into what's going really, really good. Give you a chance to brag about your school, what's going awesome. So other schools who are listening can maybe be inspired by some of them to go, oh, I'm going to take that back to my school and try and do what they're doing there at Williamsburg. So what are some awesome things going for you guys?
Absolutely. The flipped classroom paradigm is going really well. And by flipping the classroom, that's sort of been a trend in education for about 13 years. It hasn't totally caught on yet, but with flipping, Mitch, a learning facilitator, you notice we use the word learning facilitator in lieu of teacher because our educators are guides more than they are just experts talking at students. In flipping, a learning facilitator will introduce a concept or a theme that a student simply needs to be introduced to and aware of, but the hands-on mastery and exploration of that content or skill area will be fully explored in our 85-minute block classes. And so we rotate A and B block classes almost like a collegiate schedule. And so with flipping, parents are relieved by that because the student isn't expected necessarily to master something at home. The pursuit of mastery comes inside the classroom. So that's going really well. We are one of the very few 12 continuum international baccalaureate evangelical Christian schools in North America. And so that's going really well as well. The faculty's really challenge themselves to grow to that inquiry based model where the student is also responsible for digging into knowledge and really researching and knowing more along with the learning facilitator. So that lifelong learning concept has really caught on here. We've been at that for about 3 years. We did that after my first year of being here. And so all of that professional development, we end school early on Wednesdays, right at about the 2 o'clock hour, so that we can have about an hour and a half faculty professional development where they can collaborate and be transdisciplinary and really outside of the box and challenging their students to be critical thinkers. So all of that combined in the academic program is going really well at WCA.
Love it. I love it. Well, obviously I can tell you guys sounds like you're kicking butt. You're taking names. You're doing good. These kids are getting a good education, and it sounds like they're loving their school. As we kind of look to wrap up the episode, I always like to ask the guests for what their piece of advice would be for anybody who's listening, any other school leaders that are listening. So what would that piece of advice be from you there, Johnny?
I mean, I don't think there's anything new under the sun, but I just know there's a whole lot of stress on families and students in 2020. And as we engage local and global challenges now, just taking the time to listen and be still and really empathize. And again, this is not new information, but any of my head of school colleagues know the ability to connect and empathize and really walk with families can bring you an amazing regarding the fruits of your labor. And so, that's just a sort of parting thought I'll leave, is that ability to connect. However skilled you are in a particular area really is ancillary to your ability to be a first-rate human and connect to others.
Love it. Well, Johnny, thank you so much for giving me your time today to hop on the podcast. I know you guys are busy with the school year already, so appreciate you taking a little less than an hour of your time to hop on here and give some of your insight and some of your knowledge that we can share with the guests that tune in, and wishing you guys nothing but the best as you continue to grow and you travel and reach more students that are wanting to come to your school. So thank you again for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mitch.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Johnny for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love what he's doing there in Virginia at Williamsburg Christian Academy, and I'm wishing them nothing but the best as they continue to grow and educate that next generation that's coming behind us. And as always, I know I sound like a broken record, but I'm hoping you guys can take at least one thing from today's episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Because none of us are perfect, our schools aren't perfect, and there's always room for improvement. And if you currently have some empty seats in your school, or you're not getting as many leads to your school that you wish you had, or maybe you're having a hard time following up with the leads that come in. I know that's sometimes the hardest part of being like, did I follow up with that family that was interested in our school? Man, we got you covered. We have fully automated the application and enrollment process for schools so that if somebody shows interest in your school in June and they end up not, signing up that month, we will make sure that they're followed up with the following summer, following year, to see if they're maybe interested in enrolling in your school that fall. So you don't miss out on any opportunity because you didn't have a good job following up with them. We have solved that problem for schools, and we love helping them fix that so you can do what you do best, and that's focusing on your students, pouring into your students, loving your students, and we take care of that back end work for you so you can focus on that. If you're a Facebook user, you need to join our private Facebook group just for school leaders called School Success Makers. It's called School Success Makers on Facebook, private group just for school leaders. I'm personally in there, and I'd love to see you in there as well. And of course, again, check out our website, schoolsuccessmakers.com. That's schoolsuccessmakers.com. We will be here next week, as always, with another amazing guest on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then.